Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course, Environmental Impact Assessment. Before we get into the details to understand environmental impact assessment as what is it, how do we define it, what purpose does it serve, how did it start, and where do we as a nation position ourselves in the process, let us first walk through the world environmental status. We need to know what is the situation that we are trying to curtail. For this reason, we will skim through the report of Global Environmental Outlook 6, which focuses on healthy planet, healthy people, published by United Nations Environmental Programme in 2019. And while we go through this, we are going to reflect upon the need for environmental impact assessment. In particular, we will look at Chapter 2 and Chapter 5 of the report to understand the environmental scenario at the global level concerning the drivers of environmental change and environmental status. Today, we will cover only environmental concerns related with air. So accordingly, our coverage would include drivers of environmental change. We will look into human activities that generate emissions. We will review the global environmental status concerning air. We will discuss the impact of human activities on human health and well-being, food security, and ecosystems. So accordingly, the expected learning outcomes after completion of this session include that you should be able to identify and discuss the drivers of environmental change. You should be able to discuss and review the human activities that generate emissions. Further, you should be able to synthesize the global environmental status of air and reflect upon the needs of EIA. You should be also able to review the impact of climate change on human health and well-being, food security, and ecosystems, and reflect upon why and how we are really dealing with EIA. Referring from the report, there has been sequential transition in the environmental movement. So we have been observing environmental movement for some time. Initially, the movement focused on conservation of future. Then the focus was on preservation with value seen in the nature, like why we should really preserve the nature. The modern environmental movement, which is now we see, is more about the risk that environmental degradation possesses to human health and well-being. Industrialization in 19th century, World War I led to deflection. Rapid outdoor recreation brought many people with direct contact with environmental degradation and heightened and commitment for preservation. Post-World War II, rapid economic growth created concerns for quality of life. You may recollect the Great Smog of London, the deadly smog that covered the city of London for 5 days from December 5th to 9th in 1952, caused by a combination of industrial pollution and high-pressure weather conditions. This combination of smoke and fog brought the city to near standstill and resulted in thousands of deaths. Because of this, its consequence prompted the passing of Clean Air Act 4 years later, which marked a turning point in the history of environmentalism. Key voice which brought up environmental risk was Rachel Carson. Through her writing on Silent Spring in 1962, she highlighted the environmental risk of commonly used insecticides. Her book is considered most influential in the history of environmental movement. You may also reflect upon Bhopal gas tragedy, where gas leak incident took place on the night of 2nd and 3rd December in 1984 at Union Carbide India Limited pesticide plant in Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, in our country. You can think about all the incidences which took place to realize the risk involved, environmental risk involved. Increasingly, there are concerns that the enormous gain in life expectancy and quality of life since the Industrial Revolution are in danger of being reversed. So, we are already here where we are starting seeing these changes. The report which we are looking into looks into what is the state of the global environment, how is it changing, and what are the major factors and drivers, both positive and negative, influencing these changes. In the report, 5 drivers are reviewed. First, we see is the population growth and demographics. Then we see urbanization as another drive. Then we see economic development. And we also see new technological forces, and one also identifies climate change as an independent driver to the change in the environment which we are experiencing. The report states that these have led to wealth. All urbanization has led to wealth, but might also cause trouble for us. Looking a bit closer, between today and 2050, the global urban population will continue to increase. Urbanization has been going on throughout history, but now the major concern is the pace of urbanization. It's happening very fast. The scale in which it is happening, the urbanization is happening, and the impact the urban areas have accelerated sharply over the environment in recent decades. As we see large population keep flowing into the cities, this inflow can place great strain on the environmental institutional resources and infrastructure, and this is going on increasing. The people we have to manage in cities, money we have to put into cities, the urban transportation which has to be taken care of, water supply and sewerage system which one needs to provide for the cities. So, all the pressure is increasing all these infrastructure. In the figure from the report, we see that the countries with levels of urbanization and the rate of growth. In the countries with low level of urbanization, meaning the urbanization is happening in a lower level, but there is high growth rate in population, urban citizens are considered highly vulnerable, which you can see here in red color. As per the report, Indian cities are highly vulnerable. The vulnerability, how in this report they are calculating, the vulnerability is calculated by adding the urban susceptibility, the weakness, the lack of coping capacities and the lack of urban adaptive capacities. Moving on, looking into the economic driver, economic development in the past has brought wealth. So, we could reflect upon how industrialization and all the economic development, our income increased, but has been a driver of increased resource use and environmental damage at the same time. We can see, as explained by Glasson and Therwell from Balding's work, Balding in 1966 portrayed the dichotomy, the contrast between the throughput economy and the spaceship economy in which we are. The economic goal of increased gross national product, the way generally we calculate it, using more input to produce more goods. So, more and more input is required to produce more and more goods and services. This particular process contains the seed of its own destruction. Increased output brings with it not only goods and services, but also more waste products. Increased inputs demand more resources. As explained through the Balding's concept, the natural environment is the sink for the waste and the source for the resources. So, the environment is also providing us things as well as it is absorbing what the waste which we are generating. So, the environmental pollution and the depletion of resources are invariably always the ancillaries to economic development. So as long as this happens, even the environmental pollution and the pollution is going to go on happening. This interaction and the impacts between human actions and the biophysical world have been recognized by governments from local to the international levels. Attempts are continuously made to manage the interaction better. So you can think how EIA fits in here. Further, reports indicate that the technological advances have been tremendous in past decades and continue to be much more rapid now. However, these advancements have resulted in both positive as well as negative impact. For example, as included, as we have been experiencing using the motor vehicles and the electricity that represent two of the most important technological breakthroughs of the 20th century, but their negative environmental and resource impacts are likely to persist well through the 21st century. Now, we may also note that, as per the report, the climate change has become an independent driver of environmental change and poses a serious challenge to future economic development. So, in itself, it has become a driver for change. Climate change poses risks to human societies through impacts on food and water security. This fact is established. What we are talking about is scientifically established, but more work is required to undertake in this, as per we see in the report. Climate change will also increase the existing risk and will create new risks for natural and human system. This is also a well-established fact. In the report, it is highlighted that the human activities have caused climate change and impacted on ecosystems. They have transformed the Earth's natural system, exceeding their capacity and disrupting their self-regulatory mechanism. Self-regulating mechanism, the resources they can provide or waste they can sink in, with irreversible consequences. So we cannot reverse it for global humanity as per the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change study. Further, we see that humanity has already been seriously affected on ongoing systematic ecological changes such as climate change and land use change. So we are experiencing what kind of climate change is happening. We can also see a lot of land use change. These have reached the point that the ecological foundations of human society and natural system that support other species, or what we see around other species around us, and provide invaluable ecosystem services are in great danger. So we are there, we are in the danger zone now. So our activities are causing increasing amount of pollution to the extent that this is now recognized as the biggest single risk to human health worldwide. So our own activities are the single biggest risk to our health. Before us is a big challenge to survive with this range of human-induced damage. So there's a big challenge in front of us, including climate change, deforestation, desertification, loss of biodiversity, scarcity of natural resources, pollution, and the consequent natural and the associated environmental impacts. Now, let us look at the current global environmental status as per the report, looking first at the air status. So that's what our focus today. It says that the emissions generated by human activity have changed the composition of Earth's atmosphere with consequences for health of people and the planet. So it's costing us the health of us and the planet as a whole. It estimates that the global burden of disease contributed by air pollutions have doubled. People change the atmosphere mainly by generating emissions. So you must be experiencing emissions around you. As we have already seen that trends in human caused emissions are driven by changes in population, urbanization, economic activity, technology, and climate, as well as by behavioral choices, what choices we make about our lifestyle, and then also it talks about conflict. All these drivers are influenced by policies. So we also try to regulate it through policies as to what action we take or how we respond to these situations as a nation through policy interventions. As per the report, globally, anthropogenic, meaning environmental pollution and pollutants originating in human activity, what we do. So what kind of changes, pollutions and pollutants we create. The anthropogenic carbon dioxide emission increased by more than 40% over the period of 1990 to 2014. These increases are largely driven by massive increase in Asia. So all these increases are happening because of the increase in Asia. The report also indicates small decline in anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions in North America and Europe because of the technology, they are curtailing it. Let us see some of the human activities that generate emissions. As per the report, the electricity and fuel production sector is the largest anthropogenic emitting sector. Within the sector, electricity generation contributes around 70% key pollutant. Despite increases in renewable energy capacity, fossil fuels still dominate the global power system. 3/4 of the sector's emissions are from coal-fired plants. Coal combustion is also the second most important anthropogenic source of global mercury emissions. Electricity generation production doubled between 1990 to 2015 as seen in the figure from the report, but emissions of air pollutants did not increase at the same time. So this is mostly because of the technological interventions. The main reason for this diversity include in the results. First is the improvement of energy efficiency. So we have efficiently learned how to use energy. Tighter emission standards, there are change in these standards. And also the progress of end of pipe control technologies. Then we also see there's been development of natural gas, renewable and nuclear power. However, despite existing policies and the announced aims and targets and intention, electricity demand is expected to increase by 2/3 by 2050. So we'll need more and more electricity in future. It is projected that both end of pipe pollution control technology and coal with low sulfur content may be used to achieve lower air pollutant emissions. Other human activities that generate emission is transportation. As per the report, in all regions of the world, the transportation of people and goods are significant source of emission of air pollutant. So we see transportation being another major pollutant. Greenhouse gases, ozone depletion substances from automobile, air conditioning units. So most of us have been using air conditioning units in their cars, and persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemicals, which is also said as PBTs. PBTs include lead and other metals. So we are seeing increase in this. Road transport, including petrol, like gasoline and diesel fueled passenger cars and heavy duty trucks, account for a main portion of emissions. So road transport is also accounting for that. Road traffic also contributes to emissions. Also, the cars and trucks operate and emit pollutants near where people live and work. They have a larger impact on air pollution, exposures and associated health impacts we see. As per the report, the total road transport activity is higher in North America and Europe than in other regions and is therefore responsible for greater carbon dioxide emissions. However, the report also indicates steadily emissions for last decade because of fuel efficiency and introduction of vehicle emissions and fuel standards. So we have a lot of standards coming in. We further see that as per the report, in the developing countries, road transport emissions continue to rise as vehicle use is increasing faster. So you have seen a lot of vehicles on the road now than technological improvement despite the introduction of emissions and fuel standards. Implementation of cleaner technology is slow, and especially it is slow. It is said to be slow because of the trade of used vehicles from the richer countries. Maritime shipping is another generator we see here. Maritime shipping is used to transport 80% of global trade if we measure it through volume. And we see that it grew by more than 300% between 1990 to 2015 when measured by the volume. Maritime shipping typically burns the heaviest petroleum products. Ships are a significant source emissions globally, so they really affect globally and as well as in the coastal regions and port cities. Emission control areas have been established under international law, for example, covering the North and Baltic Sea and North American coastal waters, and national laws, for example, covering Chinese ports and inland waters. The International Maritime Organization has announced new emission and fuel standards that are expected to dramatically decrease shipping emissions starting in 2020. As per the report, we see another area, aviation. Aviation is another human activity that is growing contributor to global emissions. However, currently small, accounting for less than about 2%. Currently, it's very small compared to percentage, 2% of global anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions from the fuel combustion. Between 2000 to 2016, however, we see global air passenger travel has increased, and the increase is of the range of 235% if we see it measured in passenger kilometer, and air freight increased 174%. So the increase is huge. Our aircraft emit pollutants directly onto the upper atmosphere, where their impact on ozone formation and climate forcing is larger than if it emitted near the surface. So the kind of impact it is having at the upper level is higher. So we see that all these activities, how do they really, what's the status here? Moving on, let us look at another human activity causing emissions, the industries. So this would be very critical for us to understand. Industry includes both manufacturing and mining sectors. The industrial sector emits air pollutants, greenhouse gases, emissions of ozone depleting substances, we call it ODS, and persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemicals. As per the report, nearly 2/3 of the historic carbon dioxide and methane emissions are attributed. They are because of the businesses, including production of fossil fuels and cement. So from all these, we are getting all these emissions. Global emissions from industry increased for all pollutants between 1990 and 2014, except for sulfur dioxide. As per the report, the creation of many new industrial products. So we see there are many more new industrial products also coming. Nanomaterials and chemicals also poses a considerable challenge in terms of regulation and control. Their emissions are often neither regulated nor quantified, leading to unknown effects on the environment and health. We see that the other human activities for emissions include residential and commercial activities. So a lot of emissions are also happening from the residence and commercial activities. The energy demand of built environment, primarily because of the construction, heating, cooling, and lighting of residential and commercial buildings, account for a large fraction of greenhouse gases emissions in the countries with developed economies and some cities in developing economies as well. Moving on, we see yet another is the waste management, which is the source of emission. Open dumping and burning of solid waste remain one of the predominant in low-income countries as per the report, and continues to be practiced in many cities in lower middle and upper middle income countries. So it's a huge problem which we see here. Agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, so we see this as well, also contributes 25% to the global greenhouse emissions as per the report. In developed countries, agriculture forms about 10% of national greenhouse gas inventories, while in developing countries, the contribution is much higher. So you can imagine about the economies which are much more dependent on agriculture. So you can think about the emission levels. Natural source also contributes to the emissions. Wind-blown dust from natural landscape and unprotected cropland in arid and semi-arid region is the largest source of atmospheric particulate matter, PM, and the dominant fraction of course PM in many regions such as North Africa and the Middle East. So you have seen all these things. So moving forward from here, we look at the status of the environment from a global public health perspective. And when we look at it, the two most important indicators we look at are air pollutants, particulate matter, PM, and its components, and ground level ozone. As per the report, globally, the highest annual average concentration of PM 2.5, so you also measure this 2.5, are seen in areas affected by wind-blown sand and dust. Example, you have North Africa and West Asia. We also see fires as in the Central Africa and Latin America, anthropogenic pollution in South and East Asia. As seen in the figure, you can see here, from 1998 to 2012, satellite observations suggest that PM 2.5 decreased significantly over Eastern North America and increased over West Asia, South Asia and East Asia. Ground-based measurements suggested that the trends over North America, South Asia and East Asia are associated with changes in anthropogenic populations. So this is all happening because of the human activities. But the changes over West Asia are due to changes in wind-blown sand and dust. So some are natural conditions which we see here. As per the reports, you further see the urban areas have higher overall level of air pollution. We can see the data, most of us live in these cities. The studies show that only 4 megacities attained the WHO guidelines for annual average concentration out of 45 megacities for which data were available. You can see here all the cities. Then we look at the ground level ozone is highest in northern mid-latitudes and tropics and peaks in warm season. North America, the Mediterranean, South Asia and East Asia are hotspot of ozone pollution as seen in the figure. However, high population weight ozone concentration are also estimated in Central Africa, West Asia and Southeast Asia. So you can look where we are here. The largest sources of particulate matter, PM, in the atmosphere globally on annual basis is wind-blown sand and dust. The dust belt extends from west coast of North Africa over the Mediterranean basin and Middle East, Central and South Asia to Mongolia and China. And if you look at the reasons, people influence dust sources through land clearing. So more and more we are clearing the land, and land management practices and other influence on desertification. However, there has been significant increase observed in North America, Central Asia and Australia. We also see increasing trend in dust over large part of Middle East during the period of 2001 to 2012, and this is particularly suggested because of the climate change. Further, we see that as per the report, the transported dust contributes to wide range of impacts. So because of all these dust, we are seeing that there is influence on climate and precipitation. So what kind of rainfall we receive. It fertilizes distant forests and oceans, contributes to human respiratory ailments, all the sickness, health issues, and spreads human, animal and plant pathogens for downward of south region. Within the source region, dust storm may damage infrastructure, interrupt transportation and communication systems. So all these losses happen. So you can see here how the air dust belt is. So we further see that as per the report, fires are another large contributor to transboundary pollution. Fires areas primarily connected with land clearing or lighting. So more and more land we are going on clearing, that is leading to more fire here. Further, we look into the persistent bioaccumulative toxic substance in environment. We see that the gaseous element mercury which is a global pollutant, has the highest concentration in East, South, and Southeast Asia. So you can see where we are, and in the artisanal gold mining regions of equatorial Africa and South America. In the image, we can see global distribution of annual mean gaseous elements mercury concentration in near surface air circles, shown values observed on ground based monitoring. So you can see here. Further, regarding ozone, as per the report, there are indicators that the stratospheric ozone layer is starting to recover. So we can see here there has been reduction. Now let us look at the impact of environment on the human. So activities that generate emissions threaten human health and well-being, food security, and ecosystems. So exposure to indoor and outdoor air pollution was responsible for 6 million to 7 million as per the premature deaths in 2016 as per the WHO report. So we see that as per the report that even brief period of from minutes to hours of exposure to high concentration of pollutants can have significant health impacts, and episodes of unusual high air pollutant attract public concern, so there can be problems there. However, the serious damage to public health happens with long-term exposure. The more we are exposed to it, living in areas of high annual average exposure. So, however, it's not everything is, the levels are not yet well established. The number of deaths that happen due to air pollution varies widely among countries, which reflect different populations. So, death, how many people really die, depends on the population levels, differences in population size, demography, underlying rates of disease, and socioeconomic characteristics. So, we see that between 2010 to 2016, deaths were because of the ambient PM exposure, which was increased by 11% globally, due to increased air pollutions as well as growth and aging of the population. So we see in 2016, 95% of the world's population lived in areas with level of PM 2.5 exceeding the WHO air quality guidelines. In addition, we also see premature mortality. Air pollution contributes to a wide range of chronic and acute disease, especially cardiovascular and respiratory disease. The economic impact of life years lost because of what we are losing, increased health care and lost worker productivity due to air pollutions are also considerable. So we not only health, death, but there are a lot of other losses which are happening. As per the report, the impact of PM 2.5 air pollution on labor forces in China in 2007 was estimated to create economic losses of 346 billion yuan. Which was like 1.1% of GDP. Then we also see there's a lot of recent OECD analysis estimates combined cost of ambient and household air pollution in Africa to be of $450 billion in 2013. And Asia has the highest absolute number of deaths in 2016 attributed because of this. And exposures have begun to decline in China, but increasing in parts of South Asia. So you can see, think of where we are right now. In the image, you can see the deaths per 1 lakh people in 2016 because of ambient air pollution. You may note the red and the orange color to understand the level of impact here. So you see where we are located here. So report indicate that over the coming decade to century, adverse health effects from climate change are forecast to greatly exceed any potential health benefits. So the effect of climate change on human health can be classified as direct, that are heat waves, storm, less direct, that are changes in disease, vector ecology, reduction in water supply, or severe air pollutions, and diffuse, where we can see the category of diffuse effects could have largest burden on disease through means such as conflict, migration, famine, and then we also see mental health effects arise from all three categories. So the health impact of changing climate will be inevitably distributed globally. And we see climate change is also affecting the food security, impacting availability of the quantity, access, affordability, utilization, how much it meets the nutritional need and food safety, and then also the stability, how the harvest failure and price spike happens. So it has impact on the ecosystem as well, like the air pollution, climate change, UV radiations, and so on. These adverse impact in turn affect the severe services provided to humans by those ecosystems. And then also the social well-beings, beyond the impact on the human and ecosystem, health and food security. These kind of changes in the atmosphere have negative impact on social well-beings or the welfare also, because you need to invest more. And then the air pollution degrades materials also, so that also happens here. And all these things. So we have seen all kind of the status also impact on the human and the ecosystem. So summarizing today's session, we see that we identified and discussed the drivers of environmental change. We discussed and reviewed the human activities that generate emissions. We reviewed the global environmental status, particular focus on air. We reviewed the impact of climate change on human health and well-being, food security, and ecosystem. So these were our references. The key references was the Global Environmental Outlook 6, Introduction to Environmental Impact Assessment by John Glasson and Ricky Therivel. Here you can see the references. Our coverage has been limited as the scope of the subject. Additional resources to read and watch are provided to you in the list given here. And please feel free to ask questions. Let us know about any concerns you have, to share your opinion, experiences, and suggestions. Looking forward to interacting and co-learning with you in our discourse under subject EIA. Thank you.